So this is a scoping review paper. Our interest was driven by the events or the phenomena that has happened a lot in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, or what we call Greater China region. They share similarities. They speak Chinese language, perhaps in different dialects, but they're in a very close sort of zone as a geographical area. That's why we call them Greater China region. And the rise of social entrepreneurship is relatively a new phenomenon in this region compared to those in other countries like the UK or the US. And the concept of social entrepreneurship started for not that distant ago. For example, you have Zhan You in China, which employs a lot of disabled people to work as a computer programmers. You have senior citizens home safety associations that provides or Ping Onzhong that provides the device for elderly to seek help 1996. And in Taiwan you have Children's R Us, which is around the 1990s, so all about around mid 1990s if you like. And it's also a fast growing area of research in the region. So we thought that there hasn't been any sort of review paper that tried to review what have we learned about nearly a decade of research of social entrepreneurship in this region, right? So we thought it's time to take the pulse of this field. And when we look at those literature, at the face value, before we went in there, there's this impression that the research on social entrepreneurship in China, Hong Kong, Taiwan took a very westernized view, which means that they take Western theories, sort of using the sort of same style as how the research on social entrepreneurship has been done in West. And it also seems that a lot of the research agendas are quite homogeneous. For example, we have these Shanghai Young Bakers, Hong Kong Translingual Services, and Duofu, which is a van and bus services for the disabled people. So there's a lot of these things. So we did this scoping review. We try to, so when we use scoping review, there are many different types of review, right? Meta-analysis to systematic review, scoping review, and different types of review. So we use scoping review because we want to understand or identify concepts, definitions, and knowledge gaps. And we want to know how this field is evolving. And also because the body of the materials are not like tens of thousands of papers, or if most of the papers are actually very quantitative, then you could do like, a meta-analysis, but we don't have such in the context of this region. So we use a scoping review and we adopt an interpretivist approach, and we collect the materials, the bibliographic materials, and we manually read and code them. And we only include peer-reviewed articles because these are the credible knowledge. Credible means they're passed through rigorous selection process involving multiple reviewers and editors' hands, rather than just an easily written report published somewhere on the internet. So we look at Web of Science, Google Scholar search within a period of January to end of May. And we use different keywords such as social enterprise, social entrepreneurship, social venture, social business. And we use Chinese. So we did this, that's the first step of the research. And the second step of the research is using those SE with the keywords with Hong Kong, like Hong Kong in one word and Hong Kong as two words, because some of them, they are written differently. And also using the same SE with the keywords on Taiwan, Taiwanese. And then lastly, we also include Macau in MACAU and also MACAO. Sometimes it's used O. So we use a very different types of these keywords. And this gave us 130 articles from Web of Science and 102 articles from Google Scholar. And we eliminate those that are duplicates. Those give us, and then they gave us around 137 unique articles. And then we have 4 criteria of exclusions. You can read that in the paper. One of them is some papers claim to be a paper about social entrepreneurship in China, Hong Kong, where in fact it's not. It's just used in one line of sentence, but they were picked up by the Web of Science or Google Scholar. So at the end, we end up with 46 articles that fit in with the search criteria. And this article was spread among 25 from mainland, or focusing on mainland data, and 8 on Hong Kong, and 13 on Taiwan. Not very surprising. The majority of these articles have empirical in nature, which means they use data. They're not conceptual, but to some degree, about 6% are conceptual papers, but the majority are empirical, which means they use data. And in terms of the background, or the disciplinary background of how the scholars are trying to study social entrepreneurship, more than half are using the business in terms of organizational literature, entrepreneurship literature, and strategy literature, or economic literature, and some others are using nonprofit and social work and also policy. And what we saw in the descriptive results here is the SE field is very interdisciplinary. And scholars use different definitions to define what is social entrepreneurship. But the most commonly used is this social entrepreneurship as a hybrid organization, which is the institutional or the management view of SE. But there are others as well, like the marketization of nonprofit as a definition for social entrepreneurship from the nonprofit sector, or social work embracing business principles. That is also how SE has been defined from the social work. Also, from the policy, they've been defined as a hybrid form of way of organizing and delivering public and social services that combines different values, like publicness values, non-profitness, and commercial value. One of the things that came to our attention was the limited definitional breakthrough of these papers in the Hong Kong, China, and Taiwan. Some of the interesting ones is the use of Danwei as a concept. It's a work unit, which is in the context of the socialist economy from China. But also the idea of collective enterprise in rural areas. But also the other one is more on the ecological side of social entrepreneurship. And there has been sort of a commonality that the government is a legitimizer of the social entrepreneurship field, even in those so-called democratic territories like Taiwan. The government is playing a lot of roles by developing a lot of policies to support social entrepreneurship. And the majority of this research has been very descriptive, in which they try to describe the characteristics of social enterprise and the rise of a few social enterprises, how they emerge, how they were founded, the problems that they're facing, the problems they're trying to tackle. So they're very descriptive in a sense. And in terms of theoretical lenses, we come up that they have used 9 theoretical lenses. And the most popular ones are these like institutional theory, psychological theory, particularly those that are studying intention to set up social enterprise. They use psychological theories like advocacy, etc., and economic theory. They're looking at development issues in China, in Taiwan, and also the social work theory, particularly like empowerment. And the majority, or actually more than half of these papers that we reviewed are qualitative. But the way that they use qualitative is mostly for illustration rather than for theory building or theory elaboration, etc. And about 26% use survey. But what we also observe is the papers lacking the use of novel methods. Simon Teasdale talked about discourse. Actually, discourse analysis is one of the still relatively unused methods in the papers in this region. Linguistics, computational linguistics, how the social entrepreneurs use their language to bring about change or to mobilize people to support their activities. Or the use of lab experiments, field experiments is almost none. It's really none. Social network analysis is almost none. Ethnography, we only came across one paper, which was published in nonprofit NVSQ. So still, there's a lot more to do. And then in the paper, in the review scoping paper, we come up with a framework for the Greater China Social Entrepreneurship Scholarship. We encourage scholars to broaden the scope, to cover positive social change, to look at the role of certifications of social enterprises, the role of competitions. This is the kind of a new lens is to go beyond just looking at social entrepreneurship as a hybrid organization. And the second part is we're proposing or suggesting scholars to look at public behavioral change as a new way to look at social entrepreneurship. For example, a lot of social enterprise is actually working on each of these, trying to deal with the stigma for poor people, for disabled people, for the elderly. And it's actually, if you are working on this area, you're actually looking at the destigmatization of the public opinion. So destigmatization is actually one of the areas. And the other areas is actually about campaigns. We can learn a lot from the field of social marketing, in which they have done a lot of research on how campaigns in the social marketing can enact a change of the behavior of the public. For example, you want to discourage the public from smoking, discourage public from eating too much junk food. So this sort of public behavioral change is sort of a new lens that we hopefully can contribute more to the scholarship. And also looking at beyond hybrid organizations to look at pluralistic organizations, like a combination of privateness, non-profitness, and publicness. And again, this draws on the indigenous things that we already have. For example, people from Hong Kong know who is this called Ming Guo. Ming Guo is he's an ordinary man who runs a little shop in some Shui Po, and he sells his lunch at a very low cost. And the purpose of selling this lunch at a very low cost is actually to help a lot of the poor, because that area is actually where a high percentage of the poor population in Hong Kong lives. He didn't know what is social entrepreneurship. He never knew what it is. He only came to know what is social entrepreneurship after academics and journalists come to him and try to talk to him. And in about 10 years later, then he started to call himself as a social entrepreneur. There's another one in Indonesia. There's this. He's a convert. He's a Chinese Indonesian who embraced Islam, and he started an eatery selling yellow rice, and he give it for free. Or he sell it at a very, very low price. Actually, he's losing money by selling each portion of rice. Two of this person is very sharing, and they're driven by religious, cultural, personal values. A lot of things come together. So that's why we call them sort of pluralistic. But a lot of these things that comes sort of in native, sort of a native phenomena in these regions are hardly being talked about, hardly being discussed in the literature. The next part is more like the local, the indigenous theories and concept. Of course, I've talked about Tan Wei. There's an article by Curtis, who actually he went to a visit to China and he was impressed by that. And he wrote a paper and published in Journal of Social Entrepreneur about Tan Wei. You can have a look at that. And Zhong Yong, this middle strategy, how to balance between left and right, how to balance between strong and weak, is a middle ground strategy. San Chai, how to innovate, to imitate and then innovate. How about Bayanihan from Philippines? It's a spirit of collectiveness. Business Amal is actually a combination of business and doing religiously driven charitable work. In Malaysia, in Brunei Darussalam, southern part of Thailand, in Indonesia. So these are some of these indigenous theories that we thought could be worth for the exploration. New geography. There's been no studies about how social enterprise in Hong Kong, in Taiwan, in China go international. This is another area. And different strategic research sites, such as different parts of the SDG goals, not just about poverty, but about environment, about water, about aging. And also we suggest retooling and reskilling of scholars, looking at new techniques, new methodologies that can be used to do research. So we came to the conclusion that there's no effort to review the social entrepreneurship scholarship in the Greater China region. And we come to the conclusion that research on social entrepreneurship in this region tends to be lacking novelty and lacking new discoveries. And why is it so? One of the speculations that we had was the scholars were playing safe. So they follow the style and the taste of the mainstream scholarship. And typically these are the Western scholars. And very few of the publications from this region end up being published in top-tier journals. And actually many were published in obscure journals or even predatory journals. So we thought that there's a lot of this opportunity to kind of go through this framework that we have just discussed. And one of them is to look at the indigenous. What is unique? What is indigenous in South Africa, in Peru, in Argentina, in Mexico, in Botswana? So a lot of this opportunity exists for scholars locally to look at this and using local data. And also the 10 types of context that we presented in the editorial viewpoint earlier also could be a way forward to further develop this area. And last but not least, what I wanted to say is perhaps we need a reframing, because a lot of the literature out there always juxtapose social entrepreneurship as a hero, as a solution to address the failures by the government, the failures of the business. But I think if we use the language of other sectors are failing, it may not really help. Well, in fact, if we know that in order to tackle a lot of these big problems, the grand challenges, we need everyone to work together. So I think we need a reframing of how we talk about the theory, reframing about how we talk about the perspectives about how we theorize, to look at it from a collaboration angle rather than from a failure sort of theory. That is all. Thank you.